What is keeping marketers up at night?
There's a realization that execution is not going to be anymore the most difficult part.
The European sector spends almost €1 billion on pitching every year.
It's always your most senior people, especially when it's an important pitch.
8 full-time people for 3 weeks working on a European pitch for creativity, and 5 full-time people for 3 weeks on a media.
The urge to transform the way agencies are remunerated is actually coming from a conversation at the board level.
The AI is really pushing for a redefinition of why agencies exist.
The mistake I think that people make, particularly when they're dealing with agencies, is they assume that creativity belongs in the creative department.
In a sea of sameness that is going to be driven by AI, creativity will be absolutely key in standing out, in driving distinctiveness.
I think we need to start being braver, and we need to start taking more risks. And at the end of the day, marketing and creativity is not only a science.
What does the marketing organization of the future look like?
So, Charley and Stephan, welcome to Marketing Factories. It's such a pleasure talking to you today.
Welcome. Pleasure to have you here.
I'm delighted to be here, and thank you, Stephan, for hosting us.
You're quite famous in most marketing rooms, but for part of the audience that might not be familiar with who you are and what your organizations do, can you briefly introduce yourselves?
Yes, sure. I'll start. I'm Charley Stoney. I have the huge honour of being the CEO of the EACA, the European Association for Communication Agencies. And we represent a workforce of around 130,000 across about 2,500 agencies and 30 different countries across the region.
Very different countries. And
very different countries, yes.
And you're also the president for VoxComm, correct?
Yes, I know we're going to talk about VoxComm a bit in a minute, but yes, I'm the current president of VoxComm, which is the global voice for communication agencies.
My name is Stephan Loerke. I'm the CEO of the World Federation of Advertisers. We're the global organization bringing together brand owners, only brand owners. We have in our membership 60 national advertiser associations, so associations that represent advertisers at the local level in the 60 largest ad markets, US, China, Australia, Greece, Brazil, and many, many more. And then we've got 150 of the world's largest brands that have a global footprint, from Adidas to Booking.com to Uber to Nestle, Coca-Cola, and Procter & Gamble, and many more. Collectively, we represent 10,000 plus brands all around the world.
Amazing. So, Charley, you came up agency side, and you, Stephan, I know you came up brand side. Your first years were with L'Oréal. How much do you feel this background has shaped who you are today?
Well, I think leading an agency association, I used to lead the Irish Agency Association. I'm Irish, despite the dodgy accent. And I found that having an agency background myself really helped me understand the challenges and the issues that agencies are facing and understand the language. It is a unique language. I think I could possibly translated that into a marketing context as well as an agency context. But I think it is in my DNA. And I think that makes a massive difference when you're trying to find the nugget that will help agencies grow, and trying to really convey the message that we're a vital part of Europeans' growth engine, and that without the agency sector and without the creativity and the strategic thinking that goes behind building brands, simply that growth wouldn't be there.
It played an important role. I spent my 11 first professional years with L'Oréal. It's a very strong culture. I think it shaped me in a number of ways. I think there's an obsession with excellence, of not settling for average, that I think is still very much ingrained. And I think there's also a very special view of what marketing is all about. At L'Oréal, we call it to be a poet farmer. In French, poète-paysan. Someone who's able to be conceptual, to have visions, to be creative, emotional, at the same time someone who's very operational and who can execute. And being able to constantly handle those two dimensions makes a great marketer. I think it still helps me today.
And I think even for the members of WFA, it makes a big difference that they know you understand what they're going through, having been brand side.
Yeah, I think you couldn't do my job if you hadn't been yourself a brand marketer. I mean, it's still very much my passion, and I think it just helps also understand the unique pressures marketers are under as they figure out their way in a rapidly changing environment. Yeah,
it might sound like a basic question, but what do both of your organizations offer members that they wouldn't be able to do themselves? Because sometimes people that are outside of this game, they don't understand it very easily.
So let me explain that simply. Yeah. So we do two things. One is we help protect the license to operate of brand owners. So we basically interface with regulators, with international organizations, with NGOs that shape the debate around advertising in the future. Think about food marketing and obesity. Think about alcohol marketing and alcohol abuse. Think about climate change and car advertising. Think about data privacy or AI, responsible AI. All these debates will have an impact on what is acceptable or not in terms of advertising. We're basically interfacing with those stakeholders in order to make sure that longer term there's a license to operate for responsible marketers. Yeah, that's one piece. That's why we're in Brussels, and arguably it is probably more challenging than it has ever been, given the number of societal challenges we're facing. The second piece is about bringing together marketers with their peers in order to help them understand and learn from their peers. It's basically sharing experience to cut down on trial and error. And at a time where the marketing equation is basically entirely reinvented, marketers need the ability to connect with their peers, benchmark, share experience very candidly in order for them to be faster at finding what's the right way for them. That's what WFA offers. So on the one hand, protecting the license to operate. On the other hand, support marketers at a time of profound change for them to be faster and find the right way for them.
That's a wonderful summary, and I would say probably there's a lot of overlap between what we do with our members. But I think I have a tougher job, and I mean that because the world that the WFA represents are leading brands and leading corporations that government, that businesses listen to. We are, because to our detriment of TV series like Mad Men, etc. We are coming from behind in terms of the reputation, and we're getting there, but there is a huge job to be done on building the industry reputation and maintaining the industry reputation at a sort of professional and what I would say a grown-up level. Okay, so I look across our industry and I see amazing leaders who are professional, who are creative, who are strategic thinkers, who are brilliant at what they do, but they don't necessarily get the kudos they deserve a lot of the time because it's the brands themselves that are the showcase, not the agencies behind the brands. So my job is twofold. One is to promote and protect the value that agencies deliver in this world, which is a huge part of the surveys, the research we do, the surveys we do, and to Stephan's point, the sort of learning from peers and best practice and thought leadership. And then the other side is, we are based in Brussels as the EACA. So that's very important that we lobby on behalf of our members with the European Parliament and the European Commission, and that we elevate the conversation with policymakers so that we are seen as reputable, as ethical, as abiding by self-regulation, abiding by codes of practice. So it's a big tool, it's a big ask, but I think, and I see the WFA does the same thing, the EACA has to focus. So we really try. My mantra this year is redesigning the agency value model, coupled with transforming the way we work with policymakers. Those are that's my two.
It's such an undertaking.
Oh yes.
On the first pilot episode that we actually shot in your office, well, I'm actually doing a spoiler, but anyway, there's a signature question at the end of each of our podcasts, and I asked there was an episode with a brand and agency counterpart from McDonald's Nordics, and
Yes.
the one thing that the guy from DDB said is, as a wish, was we are, as agencies, the most creative people, seen as the most creative people. That hasn't changed in the last 70 years. The way you still have even the structure, you have your account director, account manager, like all of the structure, the commercial model. So that it's...
I think what you're saying is that it requires huge transformation. And I think we're in a world of constant change now. And I think everybody recognizes that. It's just everyone. It's a huge ship to turn around because it also has to be done in collaboration with the marketers and the brand owners and procurement and business leaders and the CEOs of the agency groups and the holdcos. So it's a huge undertaking.
We'll get back to that. So we are in Brussels, and I know you see each other quite often in every year, apart from big events. When you do meet as counterparts of these two organizations, what are the things that are usually on your agendas?
I mean, we talk about many things, but there are probably two main themes, certainly in the last few years. One is the regulatory agenda. The industry is facing an increasing regulatory pressure in terms of what is allowed, what is not allowed in advertising. Now think about influencers, think about the use of AI in content creation, think about data privacy, think about marketing to children. So these are really important questions that we're facing, and where we need to be basically the spokespeople for the industry. And you're facing here a group of stakeholders, regulators, but also government officials, but also NGOs that look at our industry from the outside. Yeah. So we look at our industry from the inside, but the perception from the outside is actually quite different often to what we think we are. And there is often a perception that advertising and marketing is driving consumption behaviors that, or is using techniques, or is practicing its trade in a manner that is posing, in a number of instances, issues for society at large. And so it is very, very important for us, first of all, to explain, before anything else, what is the raison d'être of this industry? Why are we there? What is our positive influence on society? And I think we haven't done enough of a job when it comes to that. And this is something that we're discussing very closely with EACA and industry partners. We need to be much more convincing and much stronger in our narrative. And then we need to be also addressing head-on some of the perceptions. A number of regulators think that by just reducing the number of ads in a certain sector, you can be fixing societal problems. That is often a shortcut that proves to be an illusion. So it's all about getting that balance right, while also accepting that a number of these debates are perfectly legitimate. They reflect consumer concerns. They reflect concerns of citizens. When it comes to the use of AI and content creation, what is something that you need to be disclosing, and what is something that is perfectly acceptable. And so we are very much working hand in hand with EACA and making sure that the advertising industry voice is being heard. The other big theme in our conversations of the last few years has been the rapidly transforming relationship between clients and agencies. We're seeing this firsthand in terms of the unique, the profound changes that marketing organizations are undergoing, the pressures that marketers are under in their own companies in terms of delivering results, and what this means in terms of collaboration with agencies. And Charley is a very strong advocate of us revisiting some of the legacy ways of selecting agents. I'll let her talk about this in more detail. But these are some of the aspects that we're discussing, where we think we can make an impact in making sure that as an industry we're progressing?
Yeah, I think it's, thank you, Stephan, because I think one of the things I'll pick up on is this whole thing of trying to decouple the ethical industry, which is what we represent, from dark patterns that occur in the digital space. And so consumers have become much, much more aware of fraudulent activities and things that should never be allowed to be seen. And we get associated by default with those bad practices, which is unfortunate, and one of those things that we're constantly battling against. So, an even more reason why I guess the agency sector, the advertising agency sector, needs to promote its positive impact on society. So one of the things that EACA has done in the last 2 years is we've launched something called Campaign for Good, which is really designed as a creative competition first. We're asking people across Europe to come up with a creative idea to resolve a societal issue, and then to create a virtual agency to execute it across Europe. So our first campaign was around this whole issue of protecting minors online and asking governments across Europe to enforce the current legislation. And by bringing this campaign to the attention of MEPs and our commissioner, particular Commissioner Michael McGrath, we gained traction with them. We gained a relationship with them, and they acknowledged, probably for the first time, that we're a sector that really is trying to do good for society, as well as grow brands. So that's the first point. The second point about, and Christian mentioned, the old chestnut of pitching. There's a lot more about client-agency relationship remuneration, which we'll get to later. But the pitching scenario, I think we delivered a really great guide between VoxComm and the WFA last year, which we launched in Cannes, which was a global guide for agency selection principles. The ultimate aim is to stop the huge waste that occurs of time and resources in pitches on both sides of the fence. And that's both media pitching and creative pitching. If the European sector spends almost €1 billion on pitching every year, that's the agency sector, what could they be doing with that money? I mean, if we are using something like 8 full-time people for 3 weeks working on a European pitch for creativity and 5 full-time people for 3 weeks on a media, what can those amazing people, and they're always the most senior people too, Yeah.
I love how you bring this up because it's always your most senior people, especially when it's an important pitch. The inspiration for our problem-solving methodology at REBORRN that we call 58 came out of the pitch process because our founders had an agency for 20 years and they were like, wow, if we look back in the last year, our best work came out of what created 4 pitches. Why? Because we had in one room for 3 days and nights with pizza boxes, the best minds of the agency locked to solve a challenge and put it on a paper in the most effective way. And look what they created. What if we could take this process and apply it to solve some
existing clients? Exactly.
Most pressing challenges. But absolutely a waste if it's...
and 42% specifically does get wasted. It gets left on the cutting room floor and doesn't get used.
I'm going to improvise a bit, and I know we had discussed other things to talk before we got into the agency model, but I just feel like we have to, also to people listening, and explain, because if it's just marketers listening, maybe they do understand some of the issues that occur in the agency and client relationship. But could you, Charley, try to explain it in the simplest possible way? What are the main challenges that currently exist, and what you've been trying to do with this VoxComm piece?
I think it's really easy to understand when you look at the impact that AI has had on the industry. So it was never a really great model to begin with. So that the model of remuneration for agencies has been for several years since media and creativity got decoupled, has been time and materials. Sure. So therefore, I would be hired out to a client for X number of hours, whatever, over the course of the year. And what the strategic risk to that is that it's unsustainable potentially, but also unscalable. Because the only way an agency can scale is by adding more people. But then you get these vast cost centers. And, as we have seen with some of the big holding companies, potentially if there's with the impact of AI and the impact that creates, that procurement and clients are saying, well, if you can be more efficient, therefore your costs will go down because you're basing your costs on time and materials. So it is a massive risk for agencies right this moment in time, because if clients are saying you spend less time doing it, you get paid less for the work that you're producing, but you're still producing the great work that makes your client brands grow. And you still have to employ those amazing people. So what we are already seeing is a reduction in the number of people across a lot of groups. Very good people are being let go because clients are using the AI argument that efficiencies come with cost cutting. So the whole principle behind what we're trying to do is create a completely different value model around the agency sector. And I can talk a bit more about that later.
Can you talk a little bit about on a high level, what are the different solutions that you're seeing? And I understand that it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
There are going to be different commercial models for different types of work. But can you expand a little bit on that?
Well, at the moment, it seems to be a combination of lots of things. So we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are still a time and materials type, but it forms part of it, not the whole piece. The second part is output based. So you're paying for the volume of work that you generate. And that is when you have, AI execution involved. So it almost acts like a license fee, for every piece of asset you create, you get X. So that's a volume game. Then there's also a sort of licensing aspect, a royalty fee, I might call it, where, the swish, for example, the original creator of the swish would have, got quite a large chunk of change had they put a royalty fee behind it. The way I see royalty fees, for instance, is if you look at voiceover artists in radio or, actors on TV, they get their royalty fee. Unless you do a buyout, but, more often than not, there's some sort of royalty aspect to it. So why not the creator of the original concept, the idea, the tagline, whatever it might be? The other thing that a lot of very clever agencies are doing is they're creating products around their process. So it's quite a sort of management consultancy term, productization, but you are seeing that happen. So if you have a very clearly defined strategic process, I mean, everyone knows about the Diageo brand wheel, for example. So let's say you translate that into an agency offering. You say, right, if you buy into the way we do this process, this costs X. And there's no breakdown of the numbers of people, but this is what you will get out of it. So that's very important. And there are lots of little technical solutions and quirky little things appearing. There's some very good case studies in the VoxComm guide, redesigning the agency value model that you can look at. I'd love to know some of Stephan's views and
I as well.
Yeah, from him talking.
Yeah, so the urge to transform the way agencies are remunerated is actually coming from a conversation at the board level that is changing. So marketers are under pressure from CEOs and CFOs when it comes to accountability of marketing spend. For many years, marketing spend could be justified through a number of proxies. And those proxies today are being challenged. So there's a demand at the board level to justify marketing spend with impact, with outcomes. So it's a more general transformation that is happening in companies. Obviously, that has repercussions on the remuneration of agencies, but goes far beyond that. Yeah. Now, specifically in that client-agency relationship, there's a realization that clients don't want to purchase hours or time spent. They want to purchase impact. And as Charley said, no, the model has never been a great model, to be honest. Even in pre-AI times, there's always been a degree of frustration. But AI clearly accelerates that migration. And so what we're seeing now is an appetite that we've never seen before to revisit fundamentally the way that remuneration is being structured with agencies. There's a realization that execution is not going to be any more the most difficult part. There are efficiency gains that will to a large extent make it largely irrelevant, and the work of the agency will have to be remunerated on the base of the creative idea that moves the business. We're starting to see pick up among our members of those new models, but this is the beginning. And similar to what Charley was saying, we're probably going to be seeing a transition phase where we're not going to be throwing the baby with the bathwater. No, where possibly there's going to be some kind of retainer that essentially protects the cost coverage. But we're going to be seeing a significant part of the remuneration that is going to be migrating towards rewarding business impact outcomes, stuff that moves the needle when it comes to the business of the client.
And I think the outcome-based model is so important because what it does is it forces both marketers and agencies to look for effectiveness, which is the holy grail of everything that we do. And because the argument in the past has been from both sides, well, we can't measure the direct impact of this campaign. So therefore, we can't base our pricing model on outcomes. But the more and more professional we become, both from the marketing side and from an agency side, the more we can measure. But I would still always like to urge an extra bit of the indefinable, because it's going to be impossible to measure in absolute terms the impact of a particular campaign,
And you could argue that, and that's fine. To some extent, this is about an agency taking risks. The client is taking risks too. And it brings, in a way, the agency and the client together in making those bets. And essentially what matters, I think, is that the agency has a material influence in shaping those bets, but that there's a degree of risk, I think, is inherent to that new approach.
I think there is a conversation right now that I tend to agree a lot that AI is really pushing for a redefinition of a shift to the core reason for why agencies exist, which is to bring the most brilliant creativity. And they'd lost their way just because it had become really a factory of asset creation, build time and material. And maybe this shock right now will get us to a much better place. And it's very hard to see with all of these things that are happening. But I'm personally very optimistic on where
I am too.
It would land.
Yeah, I don't believe at all people who can foresee the disappearance of agencies. We've got plenty of data that shows that clients feel that the need for distinctiveness and brand building is more important than ever. We see a number of clients refocusing on marketing fundamentals and I think properly reassessing the importance of creativity when it comes to competitive advantage. And I think that's where agencies play. That's where brilliant agencies will always have an incredibly important role.
But just to tie back to what you were saying about the tension between the CMO and the CFO, I think you see this huge shift back to marketing fundamentals and brand building, but it's always one of the things that is the hardest to attribute, I guess, on business outcomes.
Yes, and you could argue this is probably one of the reasons why you're still seeing a significant percentage of ad spend, up to 60%, going to performance marketing, because it's so much more reassuring to see the KPIs that will demonstrate and validate why you spend that money. But we also all know that performance marketing is only going to bring you so far. It's going to probably help you with the quarter, and that is a consideration in a company that is listed on the stock market. But it's not necessarily going to be doing the right thing for the business longer term, and I think it's fair to say that this is still actually a significant challenge for marketers and CMOs in particular, which is to figure out KPIs that will track and make accountable marketing spend that is building brands longer term.
Mm-hmm.
We have all the evidence available. We had a brilliant speaker, Andrew Tyndall, at our conference, now who's just sharing the evidence. There's just so much evidence that demonstrate that doing the right thing, which is brand building longer term, is actually driving business growth and has a multiple in terms of return on investment. But we're still struggling with defining the KPIs that will carry the day and that will be seen to be sufficiently accountable at the board level. So definitely still a work in progress.
For me, I think the biggest reason why people are still pouring so much money into performance marketing and instant gratification, as it were, is because we're becoming such a risk-averse culture, both in business and across the economy. And I think that's symptomatic of our times because we work in this really fractured geopolitical environment. So it has an impact. It has an impact on consumers and it has an impact on businesses, and it particularly has an impact on shareholders who drive the brand priorities. And this is why I'm empathizing with CMOs about being so risk averse. But I just think we've got so many proof points that the 60-40 rule of the 60% in brand building and 40% in activation that Les Binet and Peter Field talked about, God, how many years ago now? 15, 20 years ago. And it's still not being built on as a sort of systematically. And now System 1 of probably one of the European leaders in this field. I think we need to start being braver and we need to start taking more risks. And we see it in Effie's, the brands and the agencies that are taking the risks creatively and sticking to their gut. I mean, at the end of the day, marketing and creativity is not only a science.
It's one of the things Andrew presented also in this.
I would be maybe on a little bit more positive note, more optimistic note. I would say that I'm seeing actually significant brand owners that have fundamentally transformed their marketing culture.
Yeah.
That have really put creativity at the center of it, that have been celebrating great creativity, and that have progressed light years in a relatively limited amount of time. And you may have picked up that Cannes Lions just made AB InBev for the third time in 5 years.
Yes.
The Advertisers of EACA. When you see where AB InBev was 10 years ago, or even 7 years ago, and the sort of creative powers they've become, I mean, there are quite a few of those. And those companies play a role in the community. They are a reference point, yeah? And when those companies transform in the way they're transforming, they're setting a signal for the rest of the community. So I'm actually relatively confident that that brands are getting it, that in a sea of sameness that is going to be driven by AI, creativity will be absolutely key in standing out, in driving distinctiveness. And so there's still more work to be done, but I feel that we're on our way.
Oh, I so hope you're right. Let's sit here in 3 years' time and see where we're at and see the percentage. I think that would be so great to see the dial go up.
I don't want to turn the positive spin again on a worrisome angle. I'm just, I'm always curious about the conversations that happen when we have no cameras in front, and especially the ones that Stephan has with CMOs For example, when you're having a drink, what is keeping marketers up at night at the moment? If you can summarize the conversations probably had in Stockholm.
Two things, and you're not going to be surprised. So at drinks late at night, they'll talk to you about AI and about transformation.
That's quite sad. Drinks at night late.
Yeah, they are the key points of concerns for marketer. AI in terms of, am I lagging? What am I doing with respect to peers? And the response is, you know what? There's actually no way to properly benchmark you, because there are so many different aspects to AI that you can be lagging on some and you can be ahead on others. What really matters is, are you actually ahead on those key criteria that are really important? And the second piece is linked to that, is AI is transforming structures, processes, metrics. What does the marketing organization of the future look like? Am I putting in place the right marketing structure? Do I have the right capabilities in place? And is my team buying into that transformation? Are they coming with me? And a number of organizations are facing transformation fatigue. 76% of our members in an anonymous survey, told us that they felt there was transformation fatigue because we've been transforming constantly since the 2010s with the digital transformation. And so these are clearly the sort of top issues that they will be talking about behind closed doors. Yeah.
Worrying how we have, because it's absolutely true. We've been in this constant transformation, but we're just beginning the biggest wave that we've probably had in a lot of years. So
yeah, one of the things that I found interesting in those conversations around transformation fatigue is a number of CMOs are realizing that the sort of legacy way of driving transformation is becoming the problem. So when you establish processes top down, and you're basically expecting teams to adjust their behaviors and adjust to new organizations in a manner which is basically top down, I'm being told to, those processes tend to almost calcify the process, and they become actually the problem. And we're seeing CMOs pivoting towards actually using principles rather than processes, empowering people to understand what's the purpose of this journey, where do we want to go collectively, and how can you individually steer the organization towards that. And that is scalable, obviously. And that is basically inversing it to a bottom-up rather than top-down process. It's some really interesting conversation in terms of how do you make sure that the teams are actors of that transformation rather than the recipients of those transformations. I think it's going to be really, really important in order to be making sure that you bring the team with you.
That's fascinating, actually, because I think the same thing about the agency structure and transformation, in that if you apply too much productization that I mentioned earlier into your process as an agency, it becomes very dense and quite uncreative in many ways. And you can apply processes to your creativity, but you need to allow for ambiguity and you need to allow for freedom. And so I like your version of principles. And I think a lot of the really successful agencies that are transforming are the ones that are just doing things slightly differently and are very human-centric. Because the human aspect and the talent that is in all our industries is probably the most important part of it all. And transformation fatigue is that the biggest impact is on humans.
Going to do a little bit of guesswork, but I would imagine a part of transformation fatigue has to maybe result from the fact that you get all these top-down decisions that many times end up being ineffective. And then whenever the next round comes, you're like, oh my God, one more. And one of my absolute favorite things that Rob van Grinsen told me in the Heineken episode was how maybe it is a solution to transformation fatigue of creating this culture, and also between the agency and the brand of being, since we don't know where this is going, being openly vulnerable and openly sharing where, what things we're experimenting on, what things are actually working, what things are not.
One of the interesting conversations in Stockholm was about the constant transformation. So there's not a starting point and an end point anymore.
Yes.
The need to transform is actually continuous. And therefore, it's not a question of putting in place a process to get you from A to B. It's about making sure you've got a team that is empowered and you've got the leadership that has a clear vision for this to be actually a team that is going to be future-proof, that is going to be adjusting as needed. And one of the big untold challenges of all this is that the leader, the CMO, doesn't have all the qualifications in today's day and age. And by the way, has never had. But today it becomes evident. And so for such a team to be truly able to evolve and transform continuously, the CMO needs the honesty and the candor to look himself or herself into the mirror and understand what are his or her strengths and weaknesses, and build a team around him or her that basically complement that unique profile. And once you've got that team together, you are probably in a position to evolve as needed. And that is actually a very different proposition to the sort of legacy way of, I'm the CMO, I know what it takes, listen to me, and this is the process from A to Z.
And it's those sort of CMOs that will work really, really well with agencies, because similarly, they know the gaps in their own team. They'll also know the gaps that the agency needs to fill in. And that's the symbiotic relationship that works brilliantly. You know, that's what works with AB InBev. That's what works with L'Oreal, with McDonald's, with all these amazing Effie winners. You know, they can create the most amazing campaigns. Actually, talking of relationships, this is just a side point, which I really liked from our Effie Europe Awards last year. Half the winners had a relationship of 5 years or longer. Yeah. And the Kantar did a research on this, which means that the longer your relationship, you're twice as likely to have effective creative marketing, which I found absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. The mistake I think that people make, particularly when they're dealing with agencies, is they assume that creativity belongs in the creative department. And marketeers also make that mistake. And yet the ability to think creatively has been lost. So if you think about, the great advertisers that in the past, Bernbach, etc., they were creative philosophers. They weren't the ones drawing the pictures, but they were the ones that actually came up with these incredible insights. So I think the ability to train people to think creatively is very important. I ran a training program in the Irish market that has now been rolled out in a few academic institutions around Europe on creative thinking, bringing marketeers, bringing strategists, bringing client managers into the process, because everyone needs to think creatively in this day and age. I
think this is a great segue to talk about the 30 years of Effie Europe, and a pre-happy birthday to you, Charley. So I think that 30 years of effectiveness data is quite a rare thing. What are the patterns that keep coming up, and what is something that the data clearly show that the industry has still not accepted?
Thank you for wishing us happy birthday. We're delighted to be celebrating 30 years of Effies, and we've got lots of wonderful things in store. I think, look, the biggest thing that we see time after time with brilliant cases is they have an incredible insight. And the way Effies works is that, there are equal scoring points for, your objective setting and why then your insights, then your creative execution, and then your results. The misperception is that it's all about results, okay, which means that you're not calculating in the importance of creativity and the importance of the insight. The most common mistake that people make is not focusing enough on the insight or not understanding what an insight is, because an insight is not a fact. I think I've repeated that about 30,000 times. But so in terms of trends and what's best in classes, it's always about the insight. It's always about the storytelling, the red line that starts at the beginning and goes all the way through the case. That is told in a very human way, back to the human story, that is not told in a scientific database way, because the jurors are all people. And that it's the sort of way you would explain a case if you were trying to explain something to your mother or your grandmother. You know, yes. I always say it like that. If you can't explain it to a friend who knows nothing about marketing, then, you know. So in terms
even
of
last year, I was a judge in the Best of Europe, and even if you are a marketer, first of all, you're human. You get so tired. You have 16 cases, and they're so long that if you can explain something in the most simple and human way, unfortunately or fortunately, the human assessing the case, you're much more likely to get them to notice and pay attention to the important things. Yes.
Yeah. So some key trends, I talked about the length of relationship and that you're twice as likely to have a successful creative campaign if you are in a long-term relationship with your agency, which is great to hear.
I think that's very true for you as well as an organization, the long-term partnerships you're trying to build.
Absolutely.
And it would be interesting to think do we have any insights? Now I'm going to confuse insights with facts of what is it that gets released or what opens up with these long-term relationships?
It goes back to what we were talking about in terms of you don't feel like you're taking a risk by trusting an agency you've known for longer than 5 years. And so you're more accepting of different creativity, different way of doing things, because you've got that inbuilt relationship. Probably also maybe it's to do with the agency knowing the brand so well. I mean, I think this whole piece, this big trend around influencer marketing and content creation is also a direct result of that. Because if your agency that you've known very well is encouraging you to use content creation and influencer marketing, you're more likely to see that come through. So in 2023, for instance, 0% of the winners had influencer marketing built into their case. 7% in 2024, 30% last year. So a third of all the winning cases used influencer marketing. And that's a direct result of the conversation going around the table.
Yeah. Not every client-agency relationship needs to be a longer-term client-agency relationship. However, this default of pitching in order to address an issue in that client-agency relationship, that is what is wrong.
Yes.
So it's perfectly acceptable if a company feels that they need to be changing agencies for all sorts of reasons. But often calling for a pitch is an inadequate response to a shortcoming in that relationship. Now, either because the client isn't behaving in the right manner, isn't briefing in the right manner, or the agency isn't. But there are multiple ways of addressing that before breaking that relationship. But I'm not arguing that every single relationship needs to be a long-term relationship.
Charley, the 30th edition of Effie, you guys are introducing two new categories, Effie for Democracy and Effie for Decades of Sustained Success.
I know.
Well, that's exciting, but why those? Why now? Can you?
Well, I mean, starting with the Effies for Sustained Success for 10 years or more, I mean, it just seems appropriate that, if we've got a 30th anniversary, we have the Sustained Success category, which covers 3 years or more. Why not go for 10 years or more? And you off the top of your head who's going to enter. It's going to be, well, actually, I shouldn't even name the brands because that's just too much. But the agencies and the brands that will enter, because you can see you can think of them off the top of your head. What has been running for 10 years or more. And I think it's particularly important right now to do this because of everything that we've talked about, because of wanting to really push the long-term brand building gains that comes with sustained fundamentals, as you call it. The other one, so the sustained success, and I'm very excited to see who enters and what happens there. The other Effie is the Effie for the long title is the Effie for Civic Engagement and Democracy.
Wow.
And civic engagement doesn't really mean an awful lot in the European context, but it was a requirement from America because that's what they call it. And democracy was very much the European version of it. And that is really to celebrate brands that are helping with the democratic process. So if you, for instance, have funded taxis to take voters to polling stations, if you have put electronic devices into, key rural areas for voting, if you have explained, to citizens how the voting process works, free of charge, NGOs, all of these things matter so much to keep our democratic process alive. And, last Saturday, we celebrated Europe Day. We, as Europeans, we need to be so proud of how we have upheld our democratic values. And yay, Hungary's back in. But, there is, and I don't want to get political, but it is really, really important that we sing about what it is we do here that's really great in Europe across so many different regions with so many different nationalities at play.
Absolutely. WFA's purpose, and I hope I'm correct in this, is better marketing, nor more nor less, but better. In 2026, what does this mean for you?
So indeed, it's our purpose. And what it means is more effective, more responsible, and more sustainable marketing. And the three go hand in hand. They've always been interconnected, but probably today more than ever. You can't be effective if you don't seem to be responsible. Just take AI, using AI to create content. If you don't have the trust of people in the way you do it, in the way you disclose it, you're not going to be effective.
Right.
And if you're not addressing the longer term aspiration for the way you do it to be sustainable, you're not going to be winning longer term. We've released in Stockholm a really interesting research on the fact that sustainability is a driver of growth, because it addresses a significant aspiration of people, and it can be a unique competitive advantage. So effectiveness is not in contradiction with responsibility, and it's not in contradiction with sustainability. It actually goes hand in hand. That's our deep conviction, and that's the purpose of our organization.
Okay. Charley, when you look at the agencies that are thriving right now versus the ones that are maybe falling behind, what is the difference that shows up first? Is it the talent, the pricing, the work?
Number one, it's always going to be talent, but it's about how you how that talent shows up. So what's fascinating about the VoxComm paper and what Brian Kesman, who's the author from Lodestar Consulting, has done is he's actually developed for the first time an agency archetype model. And so he starts off with agencies that are busy by design. In other words, they work and work and work, and it's all time and materials output. And then it's scaling with strain, because if they've been busy by design and they now try and scale, they're scaling with strain because they've realized they need to keep adding more people, and that becomes. And then probably where a lot of people sit right this moment is expertly undervalued. And I love that expression because it just says what it is. It's that you've got these incredible brains, really amazing people, but they're not being remunerated correctly because the value proposition hasn't quite been defined. And then the holy grail is distinctly scalable. So that whole piece around, what makes them distinct, how they can identify what their value proposition is, and then how they remunerate it, and they've got that value proposition right before they go to market with a new pricing model. So those are the ones that are really doing well, the ones that have completely defined what their value proposition is. And there's not one size fits all. And it's not independents can do it better than groups, can do it better than social agencies versus, experiential agencies. It is every agency has this unique opportunity to do something that distinguishes themselves.
If we wrap up with my final question, which is the signature closing of all of our episodes, which is, it links back to the 58-hour process that I talked to you in the beginning of the episodes that we have at REBORRN. So if you, in different days of this week with your respective teams, had 58 hours with the most brilliant, creative minds in the industry, what challenge would you want to solve that you think would really propel the industry forward? Stephan?
So I could have responded, I would like to solve once and for all the cross-media measurement challenge, finding a way to measure all media in a manner that is holistic, consistent, and finally provides agencies and clients the data that will allow them to make decisions in an accountable manner. But I'm not going to pick that.
No.
I could have said, finding a KPI that will enable us to finally measure brand building in a manner that builds confidence with CFOs and CEOs, but I'm not picking it.
Okay.
I'm picking something personal.
Okay.
I've helped a farm in Belgium, in the Ardennes, which is a rural area here, move from traditional farm production to organic. And I've discovered a sector that I had never really been familiar with, and started to understand what it means to grow food in an environment that is relatively favorable. No? Mm-hmm. Soil is fertile, weather is good, enough water, etc. But I've just realized how incredibly difficult it is to be a farmer nowadays, because climate change, because the commoditization of the farm production. They're at the very bottom of value chain, with all sorts of actors who are taking significant margins before it ends up with consumers. And I'm working with a cooperative of farmers who are seeking to move from tradition to organic, which is a big undertaking. It takes actually 5 years before you're certified organic. So during 5 years, you apply the organic farm techniques, which means you take risks, you reduce you reduce the productivity of your soil, and it takes 5 years before you can start and monetize it. And once you start monetizing, once you start selling your products as organic, you realize the challenge you have in actually building a value proposition that stands out, where you're being remunerated for the unique added value you're producing. And I think these farmers would need that help of the most brilliant minds in our industry to help them communicate how it actually delivers on people's needs, both in terms of health, but also in terms of environment. And in order for them to be able to monetize their work in a manner that is fair. And so I'm helping in a very modest manner, but if I had the smartest minds of our industry, I think that's a communication challenge that would definitely be worth their time.
Maybe you can pick it up every year. You said, is it VoxComm or EACA that are picking up a brief for good?
Yes. Well, there's that. I love this, turning them all into farmateers.
Yeah.
But no, from my point of view, what I would love to do to solve the agency value proposition once and for all is to do two things. One, to wave a magic wand so that imposter syndrome disappears. For the agency sector, to give them the confidence to stand by the value that they deliver. Because
Okay.
obviously there are certain leaders across the agency sector who have that confidence, but your average, I don't know, client manager, account director, media planner who is negotiating every day with clients can be beaten up.
Mm.
So the confidence to stand by, to understand the value delivered, to measure it to start with, understand it and deliver it, and to be given the confidence to really explain why it is so, but then to bring them alongside CEOs of all the biggest brands around the world, and for the CEOs to be indoctrinated so that they actually understand the value of brilliant brand building. you know,
Okay.
and give them, maybe it's training them in creative thinking. I don't know. But those will be my two big wishes. But really, it's a wish list. I'm not sure we'd ever be able to solve.
Well, I think if
all
you
the
had
problems.
58 hours with the most brilliant people in the room trying to solve how can we make people having less imposter to stand tall in those boardrooms, how can you increase the relevance that a CEO sees in the agency work, maybe you would get something, because no one spends 58 hours trying to solve. So
is there sleep in between that 58 hours?
well, it's usually the consultants don't sleep. We will send you back home. So fresh snacks in the morning. Okay, it was a true pleasure having you both. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dafni.
Thank you, Dafni.
Thank you,
that was really good fun. Thanks, Stephan.